Great, thank you.
All right, you wanna do the intro? I'm gonna because my voice is. I have a hard time. No, you're fine. I will. I'll say something to you.
All right, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. If you haven't grabbed food, please grab food and make sure you sign in. We want to welcome today Dr. Ryan Melvin. He is an associate professor in the Department of Anesthesiology and the Department of Biomedical Informatics and Data Sciences here at UAB. He also serves as an endowed faculty scholar for data science, AI, and machine learning, where he leads efforts to advance generative AI tools for clinical research. His work spans prompt engineering, LLM application design, and reproductive data pipelines. Dr. Melvin's research integrates data science and medicine to accelerate discovery and improve clinical outcomes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I appreciate the introduction. I'm curious if an AI wrote it. That would be fun. I'm going to talk specifically about generative AI. So the title of this event was Developing Practical AI Tools at UAB. I'm going to modify that or clarify that slightly to Developing Practical Generative AI Tools at UAB. And what I'll show you is, in this order, sort of some of our tools that we've created that you can use right now. Anyone with a Blazor ID can use them right this very moment. I'll even do the live demo, which I know is scary, but I'm very confident in our infrastructure. Which we're actively working on improving. Prashant's here in the audience. He's our newly hired web developer who's shoring these up so I can be even more confident in their infrastructure. I'll show you what we built. I'll even walk you through sort of how we built it, working sometimes both outside and inside the UAB system. And then I'll show you how, thanks to some advancements that especially campus side has made in their security policies, how you could do this following all the rules. So you wouldn't have to break the rules along the way like we did. And then maybe I'll show you like a hybrid version of if I were a student, how I would try to develop generative AI tools to maybe get folks using them as well. Okay, so if you've attended any of my talks in like the last 2 years, you've seen some of our AI tools. I just can't help talking about them, so I won't belabor it. You should see my screen. I tend to not use PowerPoint slides for AI stuff. I like demos. So hopefully you can just see my screen. It should be shared on both Zoom. Oh, did I accidentally cancel it? I think I got it. Okay, there we go. Thank you, person in Zoom chat, for asking that. Okay, this is our AI tools website. It is available at ai.ns.uab.edu. I'll type that in chat and write it on the board in a second in case anybody wants. And you just log in with your Blazor ID and you can do any of the demo I'm about to do. One of our newer tools is called our grant editor. That's the one I'm going to show off just because there's a chance you haven't seen it before if you've been to one of my talks. What you do here is you upload an application that you're working on. So I'll grab an application that I'm on. And it can do a few things. So I'll just start this one. One, it can look for language that, according to New York Times reporting, we're using New York Times list, has been causing grants to get sort of ignored right out of the gate. So it checks for language that might cause your grant to just be discarded right out of the gate. Here it found a term in this one. It suggests what we could do to rephrase the sentence where that word appeared. And this is just looking for those words that the New York Times said were getting grants thrown away, and then using generative AI to propose a rewrite of those grants. We developed this in collaboration with Chris Campos and Jim Pop. We gave him credit up here. But this will look over your application and try to prevent it from just being like tossed in the garbage immediately because you use one of those no-no words. It does a few other things. We worked with Matt Knight in Precision Medicine to get a tool that he had been working on for a while. That if you were to upload your application and the original RFA, it will simulate a review section score and return to you strengths and weaknesses, and then the score that it thinks you would actually get if your grant were submitted for review. And Matt Mike's been working on a project to correlate this with actual past grants people have submitted, and the preliminary data is that it's highly correlated. So if you get a good score here, you're probably going to get one from the NIH, at least looking at past data. So we have that tool. We have others. We have one that speaks PubMed. You can enter in just sort of a random research question, and it'll turn it into a PubMed query. So enter a question. This one actually shows you currently the query that it generates, and it will keep generating a query until it finds at least 50 articles, or sorry, 10 articles. And then it will read up to the first 50, summarize them for you, and it will present you the citations in a way that we guarantee are not hallucinated. So in just a second, I'll show it to you. But we don't let the AI write the citation part. We pay attention to what articles it pulled from PubMed, and then we pull those citations from PubMed. So it can't hallucinate these citations because it didn't write them. And I'm so confident in that I can take this PMID. We can go over to PubMed. So let's see, this was Satus lidocaine from 1997. That PMID, go over to PubMed. Satus lidocaine, you're somewhere in 97. So we found the article wasn't hallucinated because it's impossible for those to be hallucinated based on the way we built this. So we built these tools over, I would say, a course of 2 years. A lot of that time was spent working with campus IT, information security, and then health system, information systems and information security, getting blessings to sort of push the boundary of what was allowed. And as far as I know, our group was the second. I think Matt Meitz was the first. Our group was the second to get approval all the way through, doing it the right way according to UAB policy, to use generative AI on patient data. And we have done that. We've done some experiments with patient data where we were looking at radiology reports and letting anesthesiologists know airway problems that might be indicated by the radiologist report. So we've done that. Again, second group on campus, as far as I know, to do fully the right pipeline for getting the blessing to use generative AI on patient data. And that tool that we did that project I just described on is one of our available tools. It's called Label Maker. You can upload a spreadsheet of arbitrary text data, tell it what you want to find in that data, and then it will go look for it in a sort of categorization task. So I just uploaded a bunch of tweets from the COVID period. And if I say the unique ID is the screen name, I want to label the original tweet. And in this case, I have 5 that I labeled and then 15 that are unlabeled. So I'm going to give it my 5 examples and should have pulled those out. It's a little weird. But positive tweet, negative tweet. And in just a second, it will return, hopefully, but I think something's gone wrong with this one. Yeah, we got a problem. Okay, we'll get that fixed. 5 demos, right? But when it's working, it will label the text without any training examples. So this is using few shot learning or 0-shot learning if you don't provide examples to just take your descriptions or your few examples and then apply to the rest of the text that's in there. Okay, so those are our fun ones. IRB one, I don't know that this crowd cares as much about, but we have one that will help you draft IRB protocols. This is going to be our first public tool. So we have a public alpha up that I won't share the link for because we're letting some people try it and break it. But we've worked with UAB intellectual property team to get funding to make that tool available for at least a year for folks at other institutions to use with the hope of getting them to license it from us eventually. Okay, so those are the tools we've created. This is all using generative AI behind the scenes. Our tools all use essentially the same things that are behind ChatGPT. So we use OpenAI's models through a business associates agreement with Microsoft. So both the health system and the campus has a BAA, business associates agreement with Microsoft. This says we can essentially treat their servers like ours for the purposes of sensitive and restricted data. So our tools are in fact HIPAA compliant. There's a requirement on the health system side that if you're going to put patient data in one of them, you have to let HSIS know first. We can help you with that. But all of our tools are HIPAA compliant. We've worked with them to make sure our entire stack follows all of the rules for handling PHI. And so we can do that. But the point of this talk is actually building the tools, right? How did we get here? How could you do this if you wanted to? So I'll sort of show you the pathway that we took originally, which didn't necessarily follow all of the rules all along the way. And I think I'm gonna have to hit share in 2 places for this to work. So give me just a second. That's for the Zoom. This is for the people in the room. Okay. So we actually first started out using a tool called Pickaxe, which if you've used GPT Builder on ChatGPT, Pickaxe is basically just GPT Builder all by itself. And what you can do is you can come along and create what they call a pickaxe or a GPT. And so you can sort of, looks exactly like GPT Builder if you've done it before. I'll just take one of their examples to do it. What's different about Pickaxe is once you're done, you can actually immediately monetize your tool. So if you create an AI tool in Pickaxe, you can say, I want to allow other people to use this, and I want them to have to pay this much money for this many button presses. And then you get a part of the money that Pickaxe generates from using your tool. That part wasn't around when we were originally using this. We just wanted to build simple tools really quickly, and that was what Pickaxe let us do. I think if you try to get to Pickaxe, you can currently on the health system side, and that was because I requested an exception before anyone realized what was going on. But I don't know how long that exception will last. So we would start building our tools in Pickaxe, and eventually Pickaxe will also let you embed your tools in other websites, and we just did that at first. We embedded these tools into websites that our anesthesiologists could access, and they were for very simple purposes, like I want to research these 3 things together. Does our department own data to do that? And it would just search database descriptions, not actual data. Or, hey, I'm working on an IRB application and I need the language for a consent form translated into an 8th grade reading level. We did that in Pickaxe, we embedded that in a web page, and we let our anesthesiologists use it just to see what was happening. Those were sort of our minimum viable products. And then the tools that I've been showing you, we built originally all with Streamlit. So if you've ever played with Streamlit, you can write a very simple Python script defining a website. In fact, their demo's fairly good right here. So let's just get rid of the cookies. And it pops up a website. So we hooked up our model endpoints once we got access to those from the campus side. I'll show you how to do that. And we would hook these into Streamlit apps. And so that one that I said, I need everything at an 8th grade reading level was just a little text box and a prompt that just said, translate this text to an 8th grade reading level. And it was surprisingly popular. Not only were our anesthesiologists using it for consent forms, our comms team were using it for public releases. They would take abstracts written by our department and run it through the 8th grade language translator so they could understand it. And then they would post tweets based on that. So our tools got surprisingly popular, surprisingly quickly. Our most popular tool has been used over 1,000 times. I'm gonna have to switch both the shares again, so give me a second here.
Do you mind repeating this particular part? What is this used for? The Streamlit?
Okay. So someone is asking what exactly is Streamlit used for? Let me just go in their example. I think. So right here, I'm going to advance it just a little bit. Where's the page pop up? There we go. Okay, so instead of learning HTML, I need to use this mic. Instead of learning HTML, JavaScript, and CSS in order to deploy a website, we use this package that you can define your website as a set of Python objects. And so you can have things like st.button. You see st.right there, that means put text on the screen. But you can have st.button, that means put a button on the screen. You can have st.text, and that means put a text box on the screen that the user can type in. And the user input to any of those things is then saved as a variable. So you've got your entire web page defined as Python objects, and any user interactions are saved as variables. And so I didn't have to learn web development. I could just deploy a site pretty easily using Streamlit. We have since been transitioning our website to be a little more robust. We're using what's called Fast API. which will let us define endpoints, and that's how our public site is currently working. So let me grab one of those links. So this is the very alpha version of our public site that I'm not gonna intentionally give anybody the link to at the moment. But if you look at it, you can kind of see the word Azure up here. So this is a public site accessible anywhere in the world to anyone. And it's running on Microsoft Azure's infrastructure. But every time I click a button to interact with one of these tools. So if I go, it's I don't know why I'm trying to look up there. If I go here and I do my lidocaine usage by race. Favorite example. What's actually going to happen is it goes to our Azure account behind the scenes. Which I'll also share with the folks on Zoom. So it accesses this endpoint from our Azure account, which takes about 30 seconds to spin up the first time somebody uses it every 10 minutes or so. If I was clever enough, I would have spun these up before. But anyway, we have a fast API endpoint that this communicates with, and that endpoint through Azure is allowed to create copies of itself. So if 500 people suddenly start using our application, what it will do is it will say, oh, this is getting a lot of attention, I need to scale up and create copies of myself so that it can be more robust. And that's part of our strategy for moving to a public website, is we recognize that if a lot of people do use this, it becomes popular at like a conference or something where we're presenting it, we don't want it to suddenly go away. So that web page I was showing just a second ago, when I entered my search, called this endpoint right here called summary and made a request to it, and this endpoint responded. And this Azure app that we've made is capable of creating copies of itself if lots of people try to use it at once. So we have our nice friendly front end that I was showing you a second ago. We have this back end. That's how we structured it, sort of stumbling our way through. We have learned a lot of lessons, and I'll try to share with you those now on if I were to do this again, what would I do instead? Instead of creating something on Pickaxe and then making a Streamlit app that isn't very robust and breaks when a lot of people try to use it, to creating fast API endpoints using Azure containers. So if I were starting this over 2 years later, knowing what I know now, knowing what models are available now, I'm gonna have to switch shares again because of which server, which machine is on. What I would do now is I would get really familiar with Gemini Studio from Google. So Gemini Studio has this thing called build, which when you go to Gemini Studio, it doesn't immediately take you to build. You've got to go there first. And if I were developing an application, it looks like it saved the ones I've worked on before. Let's see what's up. Here's one. So this tool was one that I quote vibe coded to take in radiology reports. Oh, the text there. See, I'm not a real web developer, I don't know CSS. But you can see the text of a fake, this is all fake data by the way, fake radiology report. And what I wanted was a tool that would just pick out the incidental findings. So maybe this person was there because they had like a mass on their neck, but during their was this CT? During their CT, maybe something was also detected in the area of their pancreas. And so you would want to find those quote incidental reports that were not the original purpose, not what the original MD was looking for when they ordered the CT. So this tool, you click Analyze Report, and it tries to figure out what the incidental reports might be. So in this fake report, there was a simple cyst on their kidney, and there was some sort of like degenerative change in their lumbar spine. And those were not the original purpose of the report, those were incidental. So I did this was I basically just described to Gemini what it is I want. So I want an application where I can paste the text of radiology report and get back incidental findings. And I think I said more like an incidental finding is one outside the original purpose of the ordered test. And you click build. And what this does is it creates often a very rough first draft of an application. This may give people echoes of ChatGPT's GPT builder if you used it, but this is actually going to build a fully TypeScript, which is a computer language, application that you can then take somewhere else. So you don't have to keep it in Gemini Studio. You don't have to keep it on Google servers. It will give you all the code. You can even download the code, and you could take it somewhere else and deploy it. So let that build for a second. But what's also cool, and why I would probably, if I were starting out doing this, want to work with Gemini Studio, is all of these tools you build can be saved to your personal Google Drive. And I happen to know that there's at least a plan to eventually get Google accounts on that, working on the health system side in the fully compliant way. So there's also like a little bit of future planning here. So here's the app. And I don't know if it works. Doesn't really matter for the purpose of the example. But I can see the code and I've got a rough outline of it. I can then take that code somewhere else. Or let's go back to my one that was working for sure. My apps. Previous one. Okay, this is working. I now want to share it with someone so they can use it. Well, when we were doing this, we had to either deploy it outside of the allowed area. We had to figure out how to write Streamlit and get that on health system Azure accounts. But you can click this share button. And what it will do is it will save the code to your Google Drive. And then when someone else wants to open it, it will copy it to their Google Drive. And what I think Google has done that's really clever is I have a Gemini API key that I don't even need to know about. So the key that I need to access Gemini's model so that they could bill me if I gave them my credit card is tied to this screen that we're looking at right here. But if I hit share and someone else opens it, it uses their Gemini key because it's saved on their Google Drive in their Google account. And you don't even have to know about Gemini keys to get started doing this. You can actually go generate a Gemini key, but that may be outside of what you want to do. You just want to build cool apps for people to use. So I could click this button and I could make a new Gemini API key to use somewhere else. But if that is already for you saying like, I don't know what an API is, this seems overly complicated, just come to Google AI Studio, hit the build button, and start spewing your ideas into it and see what happens. And you can really see that that's what I've done because I've got a long list of things that I've just wondered if an AI could do. And now any of these that are working, like my radiology incidental findings report, I can send to a radiologist and say like, hey, don't use real data because Google isn't in the blessed category for health system yet. But could you make a fake report? Just tell me if this is working, or like, here are some fake reports I made. Tell me if this seems like it's working right. And I don't have to deploy it. I don't have to figure out how APIs work. I don't have to figure out how endpoints work. I can just send it to someone using my Google Drive. So if I were starting out now, Gemini AI Studio would be my best friend, just because all of this is free. There are limits that you will hit eventually if you do it a lot, but you can just start playing with creating random AI apps for free right now, today. And one of the neat things is if this isn't working, well, maybe I need to learn just enough TypeScript to figure out where something went wrong, but you can actually go in here and start editing the code. So that's Gemini AI Studio. And I'm not telling you that because I think Gemini or Google are good or the best. I just think if I were doing this as like a graduate student right now and wanted to figure out how to get into generative AI app building, this would be where I'd go. And I would just play with this until they stop me. And as I said, there's a plan to get these accounts potentially within the sort of safe enclave on the health system, not there yet. But you would also be sort of working toward the future. If you develop a clever clinically relevant app, this could be easily shared within the sort of health system enclave. Though not, it also lets you save it directly to GitHub. They're not trying to keep your code. So you can save this to your own GitHub, deploy it wherever you want, however you want. You can send it to Azure like we're doing with our apps. Or if you're willing to spend some money, you can deploy it right here from on Google servers, but you have to have a credit card connected to your account to use that button. So I won't do that because I don't want to get charged money. Okay, so instead of pickaxe or necessarily Streamlit, I would come here and play. That would be how I would get started, just sort of building apps with generative AI if I haven't yet. Does anybody have any questions about that part? Yeah.
So definitely this one has more features, but the canvas feature in Gemini does spit out code. How different is the code that generated in the canvas and versus this? I mean, both are Google, but I'm just curious.
Canvas will generally only generate like a one-page script. So if your idea is simple enough that it could be handled by a one-page script, great. But if your idea needs to interact with the actual Gemini endpoint, which that one won't, this automatically in the background plumbs up your API key, which I think is just like a brilliant idea that they had. Like, don't make me learn all of these things. If you're doing this on Azure, you've got to go deploy 20 Azure features before you can start working on any of this stuff. It just works in Gemini Studio. So yeah, good question. I saw somebody over here too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how much can you sort of curate, I guess, the prompt in terms of what frameworks and stuff that you play around with and that?
So inside Gemini Studio, there's actually not a lot of flexibility. So if you wanted to do like retrieval augmented generation or any real context engineering, you're gonna already outgrow this. This is really just a, can your idea be simplified to, I've got some text boxes and I want a different kind of text to come out.
It's more like prototypes.
Yeah, that's right. You get your fast prototype, you can share it with other users without having to figure out API keys or get them to generate an API key. That's the part that I think is brilliant. Once you grow beyond this, yeah, you probably have to start either actually learning Python, learning about LangChain or Prompty or DSPy or any of the million other frameworks that exist. All of our tools right now use what's called LangChain, which is a Python package. I think it's actually probably over-engineered, but 2 years ago when we were getting started, they were the only game in town, and we just have such technical debt built up around them that to shift away from LangChain would be disastrous for us at the moment. So we use LangChain, but there are all kinds of packages out there that'll do this. And I'll also say, because LangChain's been around so long, some of the AIs actually know about it. And so you can ask an AI for help with LangChain. There's like another one, say Prompty hasn't been around very long. The AI won't know about Prompty. So there's some considerations there. Good questions. Yeah.
Is there a literature search tool reading like full text articles, or you can have tables or just abstracts?
So when the article is in PubMed Central, which is where authors can upload their own open access articles, it will read it, but that almost never happens. And it's so depressing because I've watched the back end, like how often does it actually find someone who's uploaded their article to PubMed Central? And it's got to be like 5% or less. So usually it's just abstracts, and that's a necessity. Someone asked, did UAB IT approve the use of a P card to pay for a Gemini subscription API? No, because I didn't ask. None of this is tied to my UAB account. I'm just showing what I would do if I were a student. What UAB will approve are Azure accounts, which I can show you in a second. Good question. So this is not even connected to a credit card, by the way, which I think is an important part of your question. You're assuming that I'm spending someone's money in the demo I just did, and I'm not. Google AI Studio has very generous, in my opinion, limits. Again, I don't think Google is good or the best, or think that you should prefer them as a vendor. They just happen to have some tools that if I were getting started, this is probably where I would come first to play around. But good question. Okay, so again, this is where I would start coming to just essentially vomit my ideas and seeing what comes out. Because here in things like this, or like Claude Code, I think you can even do it in GPT Builder, creating a generative AI app is essentially as easy as posting on Instagram at this point. And I saw someone say that they think the new type of social media will just be all of us sharing applications that we've built because it takes 2 minutes to build them. I think there might be something to that. If we don't all like just watch Sora videos until we die. Some of the Sora videos are very, very fun. Okay, so starting out, this is where I would come to prototype. But then if you want to move into doing things the right way, UAB has actually made this a lot easier than it was 2 years ago. So if I search UAB AI tools, I don't ever try to remember web addresses. I let Google do it for me. You can actually, if you're faculty or staff, you can request a Microsoft Azure account. You just have to have like a GL number to let it get billed to. I think I'm logged in, so this should just pop up. And this is where we started when we were moving things into the official blessed way of doing it. So if you come here and fill out this form, or if you're in a lab, have your PI fill out this form, you do have to attach it to a GL number, and you have to give them a business reason. So our original one was writing IRB protocols. That was what I originally filled this form out for. And then they'll process it. They may ask you some questions, but you can actually get an Azure account plumbed up to UAB billing through this form. And once you've got that, you can create generative AI API keys to just start using. So let me switch back to my health system machine and show you that. So that's shared there. Oh, it looks like it switched to the Zoom share too. Great. Okay. So once you have an Azure subscription, you would not have any of this stuff if you got the UAB Blessed account. I'm going to use my health system one for this demo, but it would work the same way. In fact, a campus one will have more features because the health system is more restrictive. But once you're here, you're just going to look for Azure OpenAI. And you can create essentially instances of, what does OpenAI call it? The AI playground. And so I have this place where I can go. Their naming convention and links are kind of silly. But eventually I'll open up the AI Foundry where I can deploy models. So for example, I've got on this instance, GPT-4o mini still deployed. And there is my key, my target URL for using this, and my API key is right here. And so if you already know something about programming, this is really all you need, right? Once you've got the endpoint URL and the key, you're off to the races. So if you wanted to take an app that maybe you demoed or prototyped in Gemini Studio, if you're following my explanation, you would then get an official campus Azure account, deploy one of the models in their sort of safe environment. And then you've got an endpoint and a key, and you can make requests to that model. In fact, there's even examples of doing it in Python over here, or whatever your favorite language is. So if you want to do it in JavaScript, they have an example right there of exactly what you would write in your code. And if you or your PI has gotten this account, as far as all campus side activities are concerned, you're good to go, because this is a UAB approved tool. It falls in the UAB approved language of, yeah, you can use it for everything except restricted data at that point. If you wanted to start using it for, oh, you can't go back on a Duo. That would happen there. Anyway, let me just bring up the form again. AI tools. There you go. Yeah, these are approved AI tools. So once you've got your Azure account approved, you're off to the races. If you wanted to do this with actual patient data, or other restricted data, you'd have to get a health system version of the Azure account, which we did, which was admittedly much harder. We had to like answer questions for a committee, get an IRB approval, send them our IRB approval, answer more questions for a committee. It took us a while, but we now have an Azure account that's approved even for protected health information. And we have used it for such. As far as I know, again, second group on campus to do that. Precision medicine beat us by a couple of weeks. Okay, so far I've talked about if I were doing this today, I would go to Gemini Studio, I'd sort of just put my idea in there sloppily, let the AI vibe code it, maybe get a demo together, maybe share it with some people over Google Drive. And then if I thought I had something that was actually useful or I needed to use on real UAB data, I would get a key from here and then use my Azure account to, my UAB approved Azure account to actually build that app somewhere else. And what's nice is there are all kinds of coding agents that can help you now. In fact, once you have the Azure account, switch so the Zoom people can see that page. So once you have the Azure account through the UAB form, did everybody on Zoom see that? So if you Google UAB AI tools, you'll find this page, and you can click this button to request a campus-side Azure account, which is pretty handy. And once you have that, it turns out that OpenAI Codex can be hooked to your Azure account. Yeah. So I had to follow these instructions, and I had to follow them exactly. But now, on my health system machine, I have OpenAI Codex running using the models in my health system blessed account. And so I've even had Codex help me with analysis projects on human research because I've got the approvals all along the way to do that. And so if you wanted to use this in a sort of blessed fashion on UAB research data, you could get the campus side to approve your account. You could plumb up Codex to your Azure account, and then you can start talking to Codex in a safe way. And I'll show you some of that here. So let's just make like a quick folder. So now I'm talking to a coding agent. So if I had copied my Gemini Studio code into this folder, I could then even have Codex help me connect up my API keys. So let's sort of do that. Create a simple stream. And again, because I followed those instructions and plumbed up Codex CLI, the coding agent, to my health system Azure account, I'm doing all of this in a stack that's safe for any kind of UAB data at this point. Okay, so it's going to work on that. And then what I could say at the end is, oh, here is my key. Here is my endpoint. Can you help me figure out how to integrate those into the app? And so even if you don't know programming, I could download my Gemini Studio app that used a Gemini key, and then I can say, oh, I need to change this application to using an OpenAI key from Azure. Here's my key, here's my endpoint, and it'll do it. And you might say, well, you shouldn't put your API key into Codex because it's sending it across the internet. Well, that's true, but everything about my stack is safe enough for patient data, so I feel like it's safe enough for my API key too. All right, any questions about that sort of workflow? Okay, so to review, I told you if I were doing this now, I'd go to Gemini Studio, just spew ideas into it until I come across something that's interesting. Then I would go get an UAB Azure key from the campus side request, or if I really needed to use patient data, I would have to talk to HSIS. But I get an Azure key from a UAB approved way. I would then use a coding agent to help me adjust the application that I built in Gemini. And I can even use a coding agent like Codex that's plumbed up to the UAB approved Azure instance to modify that Gemini code to use my UAB approved Azure endpoints. And so all along the way, I've followed the rules and created a tool that I can now start sharing with people. And if you're interested in, well, how could I share my tool? We've actually started doing this. So one of the big changes that Prashant, who I called out earlier, is making is he's turning our website into a widget store. So if you build a tool and you say, hey, I know you've got the relationship with HSIS and with Campus IT, could we get our tool on your website? We'll probably say yes, because we've already been doing that for people. So if I head over to our website, it's gonna make me log in again. A couple of our tools are actually ones other people built. So in our grant editor tool, Matt Mike built the score simulator, and now it's part of our website. Chris Campos built, from another department, built this tool that checks for NIH no-no words. And now that's part of our website. So you could build something, and we could get it as part of our website, as long as you sort of follow the rules all along the way. And that's how I would build practically an AI tool at UAB, just to bring it all on. Any questions or anything else anybody want to see demoed? Yeah.
Would you upload any documents and how, like how are they, let's say if we have a patient be like something you uploaded, like how is it not leaked outside of the app?
So if you were, I'll answer that maybe two ways. If you were using one of our tools, like if you had a research project you were using Label Maker for, and you told HSIS you're going to use patient data, you have to do that first. We would save a copy in our database that lives in the general services building at UAB of what you uploaded, because HSIS information security has asked us to maintain an audit trail. So if someone does something bad, we could find it. So we have to follow that rule. That data will necessarily go to Microsoft servers. So it'll be transmitted across the internet, encrypted though. Microsoft does save the data for 30 days in case UAB wants to audit it from that side. So that's part of their agreement with Microsoft. But after 30 days, it's gone from Microsoft servers. Microsoft has agreed that none of this can ever be publicly disclosed. None of it can ever be used to train an AI. So nothing about this constitutes a public disclosure, which is why we're comfortable asking people to put their research ideas in here, because there's no public disclosure happening, at least on purpose. Microsoft can always get hacked. There can always be a breach. So what I've been telling people is I'm fine putting my $1 million ideas in here, but I wouldn't put my $1 billion ideas. Good question. Other questions? Yeah.
So for the brand right? Alright. Expose them and I know that we.
Yes. So our literature search tool, it's hidden. We probably should make this interface better. But if you click this working on scoping review option and you click generate BibTeX file, any document that one of our tools created, and that is the restriction, it does need to be something our tools created. So let me grab one we just did. Hopefully this one won't break now. Do I have to fill this in? We don't use this very often. There we go. Okay, so I upload any document one of our tools created, and it will create a .bib file, which, as far as I know, any popular citation manager can read. So you could just drag this file on top of a note, and it'll import all the stuff in it. Yeah, it's a BibTeX is a widely recognized format for the citation manager. I also don't manage my citations anymore. I let my grad students do it, so I may be out of touch. That's probably the most honest thing I'll say today. Any other questions?
Kind of curious, have you explored Cursor? Yeah.
Yeah, so we use Cursor. We don't like Cursor because I have no vendor preferences. I have to say that as a health system employee, I have no vendor preferences. Our group does not use Cursor because no matter what settings you change, Cursor uses their own autocomplete model. So there's no way for me to get Cursor to only send data to our Azure instance. And that was like a sneaky thing that I was like, wait, that request went too fast. None of our models are that fast. So how did you get that? And when I looked through our logs, I realized that it was sending stuff to their own model. So we instead use kilocode, which you can fully hook up to your own models and it will only use your own models. Or lately we've been using Codex because Microsoft told us how to hook it exclusively to our Azure models in our Health System Blessed account. So Codex and kilocode are where we're at. Cursor is a very cool product, but at least within the regulated environment on the health system side, we don't feel good about using it. Yeah, good question.
What about the Copilot?
As far as I know, campus side is working on getting Copilot sort of as part of their account. There's a campus GitHub Enterprise license already. We're members of it. And they said that they are going to start offering to labs the ability to pay for a Copilot add-on. So like on our GitHub, maybe I'll just showing would make more sense than telling. Because I have to authenticate first. Okay. So all of these repositories right here are in our campus side enterprise account. And right now, unless they changed it, Copilot was disabled for the enterprise license. Yeah. And so eventually they're going to start letting labs pay $19 a month to have the people in their lab be able to use Copilot through the campus enterprise license. If you meant GitHub Copilot, but there are like 10 Microsoft products called Copilot, so you might have done something else.
Is it different from the access to GitHub Copilot from student account?
So if you use Copilot right now, you're technically using your personal Copilot, which you could run afoul of some UAB policies that way. So it would technically only be allowed for public data, not sensitive data. I don't know if you guys know the UAB data rubric. I like look at it daily and pray to it like a saint. So there's public data, which I think makes a lot of sense. There's sensitive data, which I think you should go look at the real definition, but it's something like disclosure could cause moderate harm to UAB, and then there's restricted data, which is disclosure could cause severe harm to UAB. So you would have to stay technically in the public data if you were using GitHub Copilot right now. But again, if you're just working on a lab on like omics data that's from public databases, nobody probably cares. No one's ever going to come check on you or get mad at you. We just wanted to reach this place where we would have a publicly available AI site. That's been our 2-year journey. And we knew that if we ever broke a rule along the way, we would be risking that goal. So we've been obsessively following the rules all along the way. Good questions, other questions? Okay, I'm happy to stick around. Anyone else to chat? Oh.
Everyone, please remember to sign in. That's how we can afford to give you snacks and refreshments. So please sign in. Using the QR code.
So there on the board is our AI website, which anyone with the Blazor ID can use right now, and I'll also put it. And I think this was recorded, so hopefully it gets distributed, and then there's a record of how to build AI tools the right way for UAB. Thanks. Do you want me to just go ahead and end the Zoom?
Yeah, that's perfect.